Hey there, kids. Let's talk fractions. Right here, we have all the fraction pieces. Each one of these, if it has a 1 on top, is called a unit fraction. So for on the blue part here, there's 2 unit fractions. You have 1/2 and 1/2. Okay, so together, if you have these 1/2 and 1/2, that equals a whole. The next thing is you see you have thirds. Okay, and each one of these, there's 3 of them, 1, 2, 3. Each one is a unit fraction. If you have 3/3, that equals a whole. So anytime you have a numerator and denominator the same, it equals a whole. So here, if we have 2/2, 2 over 2, that's the same thing as a whole. Down here, the next one is hard to see where they are, but they're divided right there. And if you have 3 out of 3, that equals a whole. Down here, you have 4 of these yellow pieces. So if you have 4 out of 4, the numerator and denominator are the same. The top number and the bottom number are the same. That equals a whole, okay? Because it's the same length as this red piece up here, okay? Now, each one of these is called a unit fraction. There's one unit fraction. There's a unit fraction. Here's a unit fraction. Here is one. One of these plastic pieces is a unit fraction. Okay, there's a unit fraction, there's one. They're all the same, aren't they? All right, well, let's talk about adding fractions right here. Okay, so if we take 2 of these pieces right here, we take one of the unit fractions and one of the unit fractions, we have 2 of the unit fractions. 1/3 plus 1/3 equals, right, 2/3. Okay, next. Here we have 1/4, here it is right here, and 1/4. That equals how many fourths? Right, that equals 2/4. Now you might have noticed too that that's also the same thing as 1/2, okay? 2/4, 2 is half of 4, and that equals 1/2, right? Okay, here's the next one. What's 1/2 and 1/2? How much does that equal? I'll give you a hint. That equals 2/2. Do you see them? Here's 1/2 and 1/2, that equals 2/2. But remember, I told you if the top number and the bottom number, the numerator and denominator, are the same, that equals 1. Isn't it true that these 2 blue pieces equal one of the red pieces? Good. Okay, how about 1/8 plus 1/8? Well, that equals 2/8. And you could just write that and you'd be correct. But it also, if you take 2 of these pieces, there's a unit fraction and a unit fraction. If you add those together, 1/8 plus 1/8, that happens to be the same length as 1/4. And we say that this 1/4 is simplified. It's easier to imagine the yellow piece than 2 of the brown pieces. So 2/8 really equals the same thing as 1/4. You can get that by dividing the numerator and denominator by 2. 2 divided by 2, that's 1. 8 divided by 2, that's 4. But if you just wrote 2/8, you'd be correct. Okay? Next, 2/3 plus 2/3. I'm sorry, I didn't say that right. This is 2/3 plus 1/3. Okay, well, you have 2/3. There they are right there. Plus, you add on this one right here. How many thirds do you have? Right, you have 3/3. And how much does that equal? Right, that equals 1. Okay, the next one. This is 3/8 plus 1/8. Well, here you have 3/8 plus 1 more eighth. How much is that? How many eighths is that? That's 4/8, right. But isn't 4 half of 8? Yeah, so you could either write 4/8, but you know that 4 is half of 8, so that's also equal to 1/2. Okay, next. 1/4 plus 3/4. Here's 1/4 right here, plus 3 more fourths. That one, and that one. If you were to add them all together, each one of these is a unit fraction. Okay, how many yellow pieces would you have? Well, you'd have 4, and each one of them is a fourth. So you'd have 4/4, and that equals 1 whole, right? Next. Here we have 1/2 plus 1/4. Now this is tricky. Kids get confused. But remember before we said that If we were to trade in this 1/2, this could really be a 4th, and this could really be a 4th, and then we'd be able to add them together, because 2/4 is really a half, isn't it? Isn't 2 half of 4? Yeah. Plus one more 4th, that equals 3/4. Do you see them? There's 1, 2, those two made 2/4, plus one more 4th equals 3/4. All right, next. 3/4 plus 1/2. Well, this gets a little bit tricky right here, but remember I told you that instead of a half, we could call this 2/4, right? There's a 4th and there's a 4th, because 2/4 really equals the same thing as 1/2, doesn't it? Isn't 2 half of 4? Right. Now we can add them up. 1/4 plus 1/4 is 2/4, plus another one is 3/4, plus another one is 4/4, plus another one is 5/4. Now, this you need to fix because you can't have the numerator bigger than the denominator. But 5/4 is really the same thing as 4/4. Here they are, 1, 2, 3, 4. And remember that 4/4 equals 1 whole. If the numerator and denominator are the same, that equals a whole. So we have 4/4, but don't forget about this one right here. So 4/4 is 1 plus that one right there equals 1 and 1/4. You get what I'm saying? All right, next. Oh, man, 3/4 plus 3/4. Well, there's 1, 2, 3, plus we have another 3. So there's 4, 5, 6. So that's 6/4. But you can imagine that that's the same thing. If we cut it right here, that would be the same thing as 4/4 plus 2 more 4ths right there. And that equals, this equals a whole. That's 1 whole, right? There it is right there. That equals 1 whole and 2/4, but 2/4 really equals a half. So that's the same thing as 1 1/2. You get what I did there? 1 1/2. All right, next. Oh, 2/3 plus 2/3. So 1, 2, there's 2/3, plus 2 more thirds. That equals 4/3. But once again, we went over the length of 1 right here. We went too far, didn't we? Okay, so you can imagine that we could also say that this is equal to 3/3. There's 3/3. Plus 1 more third right there. And that equals, remember that I told you that this was 1, and we can see it right there, 3/3 equals 1. So that's 1 and 1/3, okay, because it goes over the end, doesn't it? So that equals the same thing as 1 and 1/3. All right, next. 7/8 plus 1/8. Well, here they are. Each one of these is a unit fraction. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Plus you do one more, that makes 8. So that equals 8/8. How much does 8/8 equal? Right, 8/8 equals the same thing as 1 whole. And there it is. You see it? Okay, so there you go, kids. That was adding fractions right there. Watch the video again if you need help. You got to be able to do this. Come and talk to us. Bye-bye.